My stepson told his friend I was just the guy he lives with after I paid for his art portfolio, his apps, drove him hours to exhibits. But the second tuition hit $32,000, I was dad again. I told him, let your real father pay. I was down to 2 working spotlights and a dream that hadn't paid the bills in almost a year. My name is Martin. I'm 44 years old, and I own a vintage single-screen theater in Greeley, Colorado. It's the kind of place that smells like popcorn oil and stage dust, with velvet seats that creak when you breathe too hard. I inherited it from my uncle, and I've been trying to keep it alive ever since. But honestly, lately it felt like I was trying to bail out a sinking ship with a coffee mug. That's when I met Alina. She walked into my theater lobby one Wednesday afternoon wearing a leather satchel and a coat the color of mustard. Her boots clacked confidently across the tile floor, and she introduced herself with a voice that made people stop what they were doing. Alina Wade, she said, sticking out her hand. Event planner. You emailed me, right? I had emailed a bunch of local freelancers, looking for someone to help organize a community gala, my last-ditch idea to bring people back into the theater before I had to shut it down for good. Alina was the only one who replied with actual enthusiasm instead of a vague price sheet. From the very beginning, she wasn't what I expected. She had this kind of warm command about her. Friendly but firm. She didn't treat me like a struggling business owner. She treated me like a partner. We spent hours together those first few weeks. Late nights with old playbills spread across the floor, arguing over font sizes for flyers and debating the right kind of music for the intermission. She had ideas, real ones, big ones. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was alone in this mess. I remember one night we were sitting in the back row, the whole theater dark except for the laptop screen between us, and I said, "You ever think about acting again?" I had just learned she used to tour with regional theater companies before switching to planning events full-time. She laughed softly and leaned back. Only when I'm watching someone do it badly. There was a pause, the kind that stretches into something more if you let it. So I cleared my throat and said, "Would you want to grab dinner sometime? Just us, I mean." She raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Is this a business dinner or a real one?" I was too surprised to speak, so she added, "Because I'll wear a different kind of lipstick depending on your answer." That's how it started. Over the next year, we got closer. The gala was a hit. Packed house, music, laughter, people talking about the theater like it mattered again. But the real success was her. We started dating, quietly at first, then openly. And a year later, we were married in a small ceremony on the very stage I'd once considered selling for parts. That's how Julian came into my life. He was 13 when they moved in, Alina's son from a previous relationship. Quiet, thoughtful, always sketching something in a spiral notebook. He barely looked up when I first met him. And I didn't push. I just figured we'd find our rhythm eventually. We were a new kind of family now. I wanted to get it right with Julian. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I just wanted to be there, the way I wish someone had been there for me when I was his age. So I did what I knew. I showed up. Every weekend, I planned something. Art galleries in Denver. A photography exhibit in Boulder. Once, we even drove 3 hours just to see an indie animation showcase in Santa Fe. Julian never said much, but he always came. That felt like progress. At home, I started framing his sketches and hanging them in the theater lobby. People would come in and point at them before the show started. "Who drew that?" And I'd say, "My son." That word felt good in my mouth, even if it wasn't strictly true. I liked saying it. I wanted it to be true. Alina said he needed time, that he was used to keeping his guard up. I believed her. One afternoon, I asked Julian if he'd ever thought about turning his work into a digital portfolio. He just shrugged. So I bought him a new tablet, top of the line, the kind real graphic designers used. We spent the next 2 Saturdays scanning his sketches and uploading them together. "I'm not trying to control your art," I said carefully. "I just want people to see it." Julian stared at the screen, then quietly mumbled, "Thanks." That was a win in my book. And then Cyrus came back. I heard about him the way you hear about a storm, slowly at first, then all at once. Alina told me over breakfast one Sunday. She didn't sugarcoat it, which I appreciated. "He's back in town," she said, eyes on her coffee. "He's been sober for a year. He wants to see Julian." I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence fill the space between us. "I've already talked to Julian about it," she added. "He said he's open to it, but only if you're okay with it." That felt like a trap, but I nodded. "I trust you." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I mean it, Martin. You've been more of a father to him then." "I know," I cut in, because I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to be compared to some ghost with a criminal record and a flashy smile. Cyrus was a street magician once, from what I'd heard. The kind that made a living busking outside breweries and getting kicked off mall property. He had been in and out of rehab, jail, and God knows where else. But now, apparently, he was sober, reformed, trying. Alina arranged the visits supervised, always at a public place. I never said no, never caused a scene. I just stayed out of the way. But every time Julian came back from one of those visits, something in him shifted. A little quieter. A little more closed off. I'd ask, how'd it go? He'd say, fine. And that was it. Over time, I started to notice it, a kind of tension whenever Cyrus's name came up. Julian would go stiff. Sometimes he'd leave the room. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, confusion, or something else, but I could feel the wall forming. And it had my name written all over it. Still, I didn't push. I kept paying for his portfolio services, college prep workshops, even drove him 3 hours once for a live Q&A with a visiting concept artist. I told myself this was what a good stepfather does. That love wasn't measured by who got credit. It was measured by consistency. But in the back of my mind, I started to wonder, how do you compete with a ghost who only shows up for applause? Julian turned 18 that spring, and I wanted to do something big. Not just to celebrate him, though God knows he deserved it, but to remind him how much he meant to us, even if he couldn't always say it back. So I offered up the theater. We had just finished a full renovation, restored the chandeliers, repainted the walls, rewired the lights. I told him, pick whatever you want. Open stage, digital gallery, music, anything. He just blinked and said, can I show my stuff on the projector? I smiled. You can take over the whole damn screen if you want. Julian didn't throw parties. He wasn't that kind of kid. But this time, he surprised me. He gave me a list of people to invite, art teachers, classmates, 2 older ladies from the local gallery who always bought his prints, and friends. More than I expected. We cleared out the rows of theater seats and set up tall cocktail tables with sketchbooks as centerpieces. His artwork looped on the giant screen in a custom digital showcase I helped him code. Alina handled the catering. Julian even wore a real suit, black, slim fit, and surprisingly sharp. For once, he looked proud, like he believed he belonged somewhere. And then Cyrus showed up. I knew he was coming. Alina had mentioned it casually 2 days before, like it was no big deal. He's just dropping by to say happy birthday. 5 minutes tops. I didn't like it, but I didn't argue. I wanted to be better than that. But the second he walked through the doors, I knew we were in trouble. Cyrus was dressed like a Vegas lounge act, silk shirt, glittery shoes, and a wide-brimmed hat that didn't belong anywhere near an art exhibit. He smelled like peppermint schnapps and confidence. Loud confidence. Jules, he shouted across the lobby, arms open wide. There's the man of the hour. The room fell quiet. Heads turned. Julian froze. Cyrus walked up and grabbed the mic from the little portable speaker we'd set up for announcements. I just want to say a few words, he slurred. This boy right here, this man, is the best thing I ever did. And yeah, maybe I wasn't always around, but I'm here now, baby. I'm here now. I stepped forward, tried to keep my voice calm. Hey, Cyrus. Appreciate the enthusiasm, but let's keep it low-key. Yeah. He looked at me like I'd just kicked his dog. Oh, here he is, he said, jabbing a finger in my direction. The other guy. The theater man. You throw money around and think that makes you a dad. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Julian looked like he wanted to disappear. Sit down, Cyrus, I said, firmer this time. But instead, he turned and grabbed one of the foam stage props, a painted pillar from last year's Shakespeare night, and hurled it through a cardboard display stand holding Julian's framed prints. The sound of it crashing to the floor snapped the air like a whip. Alina rushed forward, voice sharp. Cyrus, get out. My security guy, a local firefighter who moonlights for us during events, stepped in and walked him toward the exit. Cyrus protested all the way out, yelling, You're all phonies. Let the kid decide who his real family is. The door slammed behind him, leaving a sick silence in its wake. Julian stood frozen by the projector screen, his face blank, his hands balled into fists. Someone in the back whispered, Was that his real dad? The rest of the night collapsed slowly after that. People left early, murmuring awkward goodbyes. The music stopped. Julian sat alone on the edge of the stage, staring at the broken display like it held answers. I tried to sit beside him. He didn't say a word. I didn't either. After the party, Julian didn't speak to me for 3 straight days. Not in the morning, not at dinner, not even when I asked how his college application essay was coming along. He'd just shrug or nod or keep his headphones in. Alina kept saying, he's processing, like it was a magic phrase that explained everything. But it didn't explain the way he started leaving the room when I entered it, or the way he smiled at her and barely looked at me. I didn't know what hurt worse, the silence, or how familiar it started to feel. Give him space, Alina said one night as we folded laundry in the kitchen. That night was rough. He's still embarrassed. Yeah, I muttered. So am I. She looked at me, but didn't respond. I noticed she'd stopped saying things like thank you or I know you meant well. Her tone had shifted too, gentler with Julian, a little colder with me. Like I was the one who let Cyrus in. But I kept doing what I always did. I paid every college application fee, even the ones he submitted last minute without showing US. I printed and mailed physical copies of his art portfolio when one of the California schools requested them. I paid for mock interviews, helped him write a personal statement that actually sounded like him. He never said thank you. I told myself I didn't need him to. The framed artwork in the theater lobby stayed up, even though Julian stopped coming by. I told my staff to leave them alone, no matter how crooked they got. People still asked about them sometimes. That kid got talent, the regulars would say. I'd nod. I always nodded. One afternoon, I caught Julian on the porch talking to someone on the phone. His voice was low but sharp, urgent in a way I hadn't heard in a while. No, he's not like my dad. He's just the guy I live with. Yeah, he helped with some stuff. I mean, he's not bad or anything. It's complicated. I backed away before he noticed I'd heard. That night, I lay in bed next to Alina while she scrolled through Instagram Reels on her phone. I wanted to ask, when did I become just the guy he lives with? But I already knew the answer. It started the night Cyrus threw a foam pillar through a gallery display, and it never really got fixed. I stopped trying to talk about it. Alina didn't want to dissect what was happening. She kept things moving, college this, graduation that. She wanted to believe it would all settle down after a while. But I could feel it building in me, a quiet kind of resentment that showed up when no one was watching. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the party. It was the way I'd shown up for years and suddenly became invisible. Julian burst through the front door on a Tuesday afternoon, out of breath and grinning like a kid who just found gold. I got in, he said, waving his phone in the air. Chicago School of Digital Arts. The elite program. Full portfolio track. Alina screamed. Not a small cheer, a full-on squeal. The kind she used to reserve for birthday surprises or lottery tickets. She wrapped her arms around him, kissing his cheek as he laughed, cheeks flushed. I stood by the sink, hands wet from rinsing dishes. Hey, I said, smiling. That's incredible, kid. He turned to me, not quite making eye contact. Yeah, thanks. Then, after a pause, we need to talk about the tuition. I reached for the hand towel. Sure. Let's figure it out. He stepped closer, voice changing. More assertive. It's 32 grand a year. Not including housing. But this is what I've been working toward, and it's your responsibility to help me. You said you would support my future. I blinked. Hold on. My responsibility? Yeah, he said flatly. You've been acting like my dad for years. So act like it now. Alina's smile faltered. I put the towel down and turned to face him fully. Julian, you said yourself, I'm just the guy you live with. Remember that? Because lately, that's how I've been treated. His expression darkened. You're seriously going to bring that up now? When it matters. I've been paying for everything quietly for 2 years, I said, keeping my voice steady. Your portfolio. Your art supplies. Every submission fee. I didn't say a word when you stopped talking to me. But now that it's about money again, suddenly I'm your father. You are. He snapped. You raised me. You said I could count on you. No, Julian. I offered support. I chose to help. That's different from being used. He took a step back like I'd slapped him. Well, so it's all about the money with you. That's rich coming from you, I said, the words slipping before I could stop them. Don't, Alina said quietly, but Julian was already revving up. You don't get to act like some victim, he shouted. You think buying me a suit and hanging my drawings on a wall makes you a parent? You threw my dad out of my party. Your dad was drunk and threw things in front of your guests. At least he showed up. At least he wanted to be there. That hit like a punch to the ribs. Alina didn't say anything. Not a word. There were a few of Julian's friends sitting in the living room, classmates he'd invited over after school. I hadn't even noticed them at first, but now they were wide-eyed and silent. One of them muttered, Dude, chill. Julian whirled toward them. No. He needs to hear this. He's not my dad. He was never my dad. Just some old guy playing house with my mom. And then he turned back to me and spit the final words like venom. So if you're not going to pay, fine. But don't pretend you ever really cared. He stormed out before I could respond. The door slammed so hard the window panes rattled. Alina just stood there, arms wrapped around herself. I waited for her to say something, defend me, explain him, anything. She didn't. I left the kitchen, walked into the empty theater downstairs, and sat alone in the front row. My theater. My house. My money. And somehow, I was still the outsider in my own damn life. The next morning, Alina sat across from me at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she never touched. Her face was pale, makeup-free, and stiff with resolve. I'd seen that look before, years ago when we were prepping for the gala and she had to fire a flaky caterer. Calm, unshakable, clinical. Only this time, I was the one on the chopping block. You know he didn't mean it, she said softly. He was emotional. It's a huge transition. He's scared. I didn't look up from my coffee. He meant every word. She reached for a folder she'd brought in with her and slid it across the table. Inside were printed financial aid forms, tuition estimates, and a hand-scrawled list of payment plans. He needs help, she said. We can't let one bad night ruin everything. I pushed the folder back. I already told him no. Alina's lips tightened. So that's it. After everything, you're just going to let him fall flat. I set my mug down. I supported him for years. Quietly. Without asking for recognition. And when things got hard, you disappeared and he spit in my face. I'm done funding my own humiliation. He's a kid. He's 18. Alina's voice rose slightly. Then be the adult. Be the bigger man. You're the one with resources. You're the one who can make this better. I met her eyes. And you're the one who stood there and let him publicly humiliate me. You didn't say a word. She blinked like she'd been slapped. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is being told I'm just the guy who lives here after helping raise your son. What's not fair is being used for tuition, then discarded when it's convenient. The room went quiet, the air thick. Alina's jaw flexed. Then maybe I was wrong about you. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe you were. She stood up slowly, her voice trembling with something halfway between anger and disbelief. If you don't help him, I don't know if I can stay married to you. That hit harder than I expected, but not because it surprised me. Because she said it like a poker chip she was finally ready to cash in. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her and said, then divorce me. She froze. Completely still. Like the threat had never been meant to be tested. You don't mean that, she said quietly. I do, I said. You let me be the villain in my own home. I'm done chasing a family that never really let me in. Alina stood there for another long second. Then she gathered the folder, clutched it to her chest, and walked out of the kitchen without another word. The only sound left behind was the slow tick of the kitchen clock. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of silence. A week after that kitchen standoff, I filed for divorce. There wasn't a fight. No screaming or sobbing. Just a quiet morning, a manila envelope on the counter, and Alina sitting on the porch for an hour afterward, staring into the backyard like she was trying to remember how she got here. We hadn't spoken since that day. Not really. I gave her 30 days to make arrangements. She and Julian moved into a furnished short-term rental across town. I didn't ask where. She didn't offer. Julian didn't speak to me when they came to collect their things. He walked past me like I was furniture. He'd grown taller. I only noticed it then, the way his frame filled the hallway. He wore a hoodie that said Future Artist across the chest. I wondered if he still believed it. The night before they left, he knocked on my office door. I almost didn't answer. But I did. He stood there, arms crossed, chin high like he was giving a monologue in a school play. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the things I said. I waited, unsure if that was it. I didn't mean to make it personal, he added. We're still family. You helped me. I know that. His voice was smooth, practiced. Too clean around the edges. Like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. I nodded. Okay. He blinked. Okay. I leaned forward in my chair. I've always hoped you'd grow into the kind of man who could own his words. Not just apologize when the consequences show up. You disowned me in front of a room full of people. That doesn't get walked back with a speech. I was mad. I know, I said. But you were also honest. I finally heard what you really think of me. His eyes dropped to the floor. You're still important to me. I stood up, opened the door wider. I'm glad you think that. But I'm not your ATM. And I'm not your emotional punching bag. He didn't respond. Just gave a stiff nod and walked away. Alina left without saying goodbye. No note. No call. Nothing. It took a couple months for the paperwork to finalize. I didn't fight for the house, it was mine outright. The theater too. I let them keep the furniture and the electronics and most of the kitchen stuff. I didn't want reminders. I saw them once at the grocery store not long after. Alina was pushing a cart filled with party decorations, plastic centerpieces, helium balloons in bulk. She was wearing a red apron with the name of a local chain store embroidered on the chest. Julian was bagging groceries 2 aisles down. His name tag read Jules. He didn't look up. I didn't wave. Back at the theater, things started to breathe again. I rearranged the lobby, took down the digital displays, and hung old film posters in their place. But I left Julian's framed sketches up. Not out of nostalgia. Just because they were good. He had talent. That never changed. I stopped explaining them to visitors. When people asked, I just said, that's from the past, and let it sit. One night, after a small indie screening, I stood in the empty auditorium and looked out at the rows of red velvet chairs. The theater had never been perfect, but it was mine, and it was finally quiet. No more tension. No more negotiations. Just light, sound, and space. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.